Welcome to Civic Warriors, brought to you by Witham. On this podcast, we bring the conversation to you, sharing engaging stories that motivate and build consensus in the nonprofit community. This podcast is about the innovators, the leaders on the front lines of adversity, guiding lights in the nonprofit industry affecting change. And through their stories, we can all join forces to become Civic Warriors. Hey Warriors, welcome to today's episode of Civic Warriors, brought to you by Witham. I'm your host, Brad Caruso, leader of Witham's not-for-profit practice. You know, most people who end up in this crazy business that we call accounting get there through love numbers. Most people who end up in the industry that we all work in on this show, not-for-profit, get there through a care of mission. Our guest has figured out how to bring those both together, similar to myself, and has a very mission-first focus with his business that he brings to the not-for-profit industry. And so we felt it would be a great idea to have a conversation about it, talk about some of the things that are happening in the not-for-profit world, and also share some more about our guest. Burton Lee is the CEO and founder of Sutro, a firm that exists exclusively just to serve not-for-profits. And it was built by someone who sat on the other side of the table first, working in the not-for-profit industry as opposed to the accounting side of the house. Burton and I have been working together for a few years now. And what I've always appreciated about working with him and working with his team is that he doesn't necessarily look at accounting and finance the way most accountants do. He looks at it more from a way a leader looks at it, and also looks at things from the way that a not-for-profit looks at things, about looking at building a culture, about how it's not just about numbers and costs, but it's about how you bring those together and make things as best they can be for your people and make it a people-first business. Their mission is by listening, understanding, and then creating user-friendly finance solutions, they make the world a better place, one great cause at a time. So with that all said, Burton, appreciate having you here. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me on.
Yeah. So the one way I always like to start off our conversations is to kind of delve into your why, kind of how you got to where you're at. And, as I understand it through chatting with you before Sutro and running that business, you were working specifically in the not-for-profit world. What was that experience like, and what did it teach you that you couldn't necessarily have learned from a textbook?
I ended up in accounting kind of accidentally. I was a student activist, and that led me into working with the anti-war newspaper right after 9/11. I was in college right around that time, and I was working with this organization, and I met a CPA who had a nonprofit practice, and she gave me an internship, and I started working with her there. So it was mostly to get some experience while I was doing some student activist work. And that led me into my first job out of college. I was a finance director. So I did work for an environmental organization that had about a $3 million budget. I did 2 audit cycles with them. I had a contract bookkeeper who reported to me, but I was really studying and learning on the job about accounting and audit, the audits that I prepared for that organization. That was the first time I had any exposure to audit. I had very little idea what I was doing. I learned how to do work papers in that first audit cycle. But I was also, there's a term like the accidental IT guy or the accidental, tech person. Like, there was obviously needs that the organization had that they couldn't resource. So one thing I noticed in nonprofits is that the administrative and the operational function gets constrained by how the funding works. But the people were great. I loved the team that I was working with, the way that the organization was run, the culture, how they led from a place of values and a place of mission. What felt right, it felt good to me. Everybody had to be really creative and get a lot done without a lot of resources. And that creative challenge was fun. Felt kind of like a startup, but the startup was towards trying to do this really difficult mission of changing something really entrenched or really difficult about how society was working. And I also learned that it feels good to be a part of a supporting function. Like, I didn't have to be the front lines program person or the person who was speaking for the mission all the time. Like, my skill set and what I was good at was something that was needed and was useful, and it was enjoyable to learn how to be a person who was supporting the other more programmatic functions, and that was in and of itself quality and a good way to be.
Yeah, without a doubt. I had a similar experience too with just going from, I've always worked at with him here, but in my time here, I've worked on different things throughout my career. That morphed significantly over time and now predominantly and solely over time. But earlier on, I always found one of the things that kind of attracted me to this industry was the people aspect, but also that I always felt that by serving this industry and by working with a lot of the professionals in this industry, I always felt that they had a care that you didn't always get everywhere you went. And I was very fortunate that I got to see a whole host of different businesses. Or like I said, first couple of years, I worked on anything and everything. And that was partially my personality. I was like, I'll take anything. You want me to disassemble your shelves? Cool. I'll disassemble your shelves. You want me to audit this SEC company? Great. Let's do that. And then that morphed into working with a couple nonprofits. And there's a couple that I've worked with my entire career and still are clients of mine to this day. And just seeing what they do, knowing what they do, having that experience. And then the people there, you could tell that they cared about the missions they worked in. And that resonated very closely to me. So very similar to kind of what you're saying. And then also you realize in this industry, the not-for-profit industry, we tend to do a lot. If you ask, what does the traditional like CFO do at a not-for-profit? Well, they're probably making people lunch. They're probably out there serving meals to people. They're probably volunteering. They're probably doing the accounting. They're probably the IT person as well. They're probably some kind of public facing figure. They're the one corresponding with the board. So it inherently, that resonated closely with me too. I like kind of being the jack of all trades, as they would say. And that was always important to me. But yeah, it's interesting that was your experience as well. But also, how did you then take that going from working at a not-for-profit, working in the industry, kind of, delving into some of these areas? How did you take that and get to where you are today?
It's been evolving slowly over time. From that first job, I did contract bookkeeping for nonprofits, and I just did that work myself for about 8 years. So I had a bicycle and I was in the Bay Area, and there are a lot of nonprofits in the Bay Area, and there's a good regional train system. So I could get on my bike and get all over the whole city and get over to the East Bay and Oakland and Berkeley. And so I would just go around and meet people and go to their various offices and close the books. So now almost everything's cloud. I remember before COVID, most audits were still in person. Field work was in person. And I remember trying to set up digital audits for auditors. And they're like, no, we need to see the paper. We need to like show up and look at things in the office, right? And then COVID hit, and then it's really accelerated to the world we're in now where everything's in the cloud. But back then, almost everything was like cutting checks and putting batches of AP in front of executive directors on their desks with the paper bills to sign, and then getting the signed checks and batching them. So I did all of that. I did the operating finance function for all my clients, and then did the month close. And that just grew and grew to where we are now. Where we are now as a firm, Sutro has 70 staff, and we have over 100 clients, and we're not really doing anything on site anymore. It's all through Zoom and through cloud applications. But we prepare audit. We do a lot of the, like, I don't know if there's a term for this in accounting, but there's the accounting function and the bookkeeping function that is after the fact. There's the auditing and tax function that's compliance, and that's after the fact. And I call it like operational finance. There's running the business. There's actually paying the bills and helping all of the execution of transactions that then has to be closed and has to be accounted for. So our firm does all of that. We can be fractional finance desk for any of our clients. And for many of our clients, they don't have a finance team other than us. We run their entire finance operations. So I usually explain that there's two types of firms, or there's two pathways in this industry. And a lot of what Witham does, you have to be independent. So you're doing audit and tax a lot of the time. And so you can't audit your own books. So you're not as in the day to day. And we're on that other path where we're in the day to day. We're running everything and preparing all the books. So it's been a great partnership working with you guys and sort of trading work and getting insights into the industry back and forth, because we're sort of on two sides of the same coin here.
We definitely approach things from different angles, but also, yeah, that collaboration is important. And it's also a significant trend. I think you definitely are in the right place at the right time from a perspective of being able to offer the solution that you offer, but also just the way that the world turned, talent is always hard to come by, especially in the not-for-profit industry. Staffing full service accounting departments. And then, as we said earlier about, you're kind of doing everything, it's very hard to make that happen. It's very difficult to facilitate that. And so a lot of organizations, a lot of not-for-profits have moved in this direction of having some level of outsourced model. And, it works in variable ways depending on the practitioners. It works in different ways depending on the types of operations you run. But the reality is a lot of the world has shifted in that direction, as you said. Running a firm, what made you stay in not-for-profit?
There's always been enough work. We did grow some other verticals. At one point, we did some work with software companies and startups. There were other industries that came our way through more software partnerships. So we would pick up a software platform and then they would list us and then people would contact us that way. So our growth has all been organic. We don't market a lot. We don't advertise. So we've been in this nonprofit network and the work just keeps coming our way. There's not an absence of it. One of the first organizations I worked with had Van Jones on the organizing committee. I was maybe 18 or 19. And he pulled me aside and he said specifically, he's like, hey, like guys like you usually don't stick around with nonprofits. They're usually getting pulled into other industries. They're going into other areas of finance. I know that you could make more money doing something else, but I just want to let you know, I really appreciate that you're sticking it out and helping us the way that you are. And there have been a number of moments like that, but just there's a real appreciation for talent and for being able to do this area of work well. And it feels good to be needed. It has not been difficult to keep a steady stream of work. I've been doing this through the 2008 financial crisis, through COVID. Every dip in the global economy otherwise has only meant more work in nonprofit accounting. I can't really draw a straight line or explain that to you, but I love it. I love the organizations I get to work with. So I'm happy here. There's plenty of work and no reason to look elsewhere.
Yeah, no doubt. We're all in this industry for a reason, and I value and appreciate that. And also, same with me. I've been very similar to you in that regard. I probably make more money somewhere else and probably could do that. And I chose not to. I chose to be in this industry for a reason. And it's because we know that the work we're doing is significantly helping the work that they're doing. And that's always been one of the passions of mine is, I know that by answering this phone call, whether it's to have just a chat about, helping your day or whether it's to answer an accounting question or whatever it is, it's always, I know that there's a lot of people value and appreciate it. And I've been told time and time again of the value and appreciation that people have for just being there for them. And I think that's the thing that I've always significantly gravitated in this not-for-profit industry for that exact reason.
Yeah, it's more about the community. It's more about community than it is about the bottom line. I'd say that's pretty true about the whole nonprofit industry is it's more driven from the community than it is from a sense of you don't get the people in the nonprofit community unless they're willing to take lower paying jobs, for example, right? Like the jobs don't pay as well. And so who's going to take those jobs? It's people who are driven by something else. And it's a great community. It's a great thing to be a part of.
No doubt. So outside of running a firm, being a leader, I think that in our conversations and fun fact about you, I heard that you're a professional musician, which is incredible. How do you take that passion for music and how do you incorporate it into your, keep it going, right? Because that's a full-time trade and to some variable degree, keeping up with it. But how do you apply that to your day-to-day job running a firm too?
Thanks for asking. The music stuff is fun. I've got a band called Sandy's and my friend Alexi and I have been working together and writing songs and putting out records for about 20 years now. We had a band called the Botticellis and now we put out music under the brand Sandy's. And I think like when my clients find out that I play music and that I publish music and perform music live, they're usually surprised. It's like they have this picture of their accountant in their mind. They're like, my accountant is just this. They just do this boring, dry thing. That's like a painful necessity of my existence. And accountants, therefore, are a painful necessity of my existence. So I think it helps in building relationships and building trust for them to know that I'm interested in things other than just compliance and other than just getting their month closed. And I do have to sort of keep focused on that as well and not spend all my time talking with them about music. But it's good for us as accountants to be known as human beings who have diverse interests and have a lot to offer other than just our professional advice and our knowledge of this one particular industry. So I think it's about being human. I think that helps in my firm as well. Like leading my team, that they know that I'm a human being with a lot of different things I'm interested in. I also think that being a creative person is part and parcel of being an entrepreneur and building a business. I can't separate what I've learned in creating art and the process of finding my way through a creative process to a conclusion at the end and arriving at something that I'm settled with. It's the same process that I go through in figuring out how am I going to lead my team in a certain direction, or how am I going to build a process to get my company from this stage to the next stage, or how am I going to solve this problem? It's all problem solving. It's all about being creative and figuring a way through the unknown. And so I think it's helped me in a number of different ways.
Yeah, those side endeavors and side passions certainly go a long way, and certainly help us stay grounded, as well as bring a different side of ourselves to the profession. I certainly value and appreciate my other life that I live in the fire world, and I take every principle possible from there and actually apply it to leadership here where I work. And a lot of the principles I take there are helpful on the advisory end when I talk to clients. And, I'm like, when you think about how structured even as simple as a volunteer fire department is, you take a lot of those principles. And listen, the way I always explain it is, if me, who's an accountant, this person over here is a lawyer, this person's a mechanic, this person's a farmer, and this person's a software engineer, we all get a random text message to show up to a call. We show up, we get on a truck together, and we go solve a problem. I'm like, if we can do that, like, I think anybody can do anything, right? Like, we're all a bunch of random, and we're not getting paid. There's no enticement whatsoever for us to go, other than we're all probably a bunch of crazy people. But I've always applied a lot of the principles to that. And whenever I do trainings here, I always bring that as kind of a leadership principle. I'm like, listen, you have to set things up in a way that you can just bring a group of people together. They can work well together, and then you can solve a problem. And if you can't do that, you got to set up systems and set up processes and set up ways that you can make that happen. And so that's how I've always brought my passion of my volunteer job in life to the Witham world. And I'm really happy I do it. It takes up a ton of time, but I'm really happy that I do it, and it keeps me grounded because, in accounting, the old joke is that you can fix anything with the journal entry. And in that world, you can't fix anything with the journal entry, unfortunately. There's some things that are unfixable. So yeah, it gets a little different.
And it's like you're doing something in the firefighting stuff. You're doing something with your hands, right? And you're solving problems with your hands, not just with something on a computer or with your mind. And I think you got to keep those things balanced. You can't just do the transactional intellectual stuff on the screen all day. It's not sustainable to only have that. So like cooking, walking the dogs, playing music, going fishing, any of those things for me are these counterbalance elements, keeping me sane, keeping me able to be my best person back at my desk job.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. You need the intellectual side of a business, and you need the manual side of a business. And, if you can marry those two together, great. If you can't, have two separate jobs that do two separate things. And, I walk into the firehouse all the time and people are like, you look stressed. I'm like, nah, I'm happy to be here. It's like, I needed that. I needed somewhere to go. I needed something to do because, sitting behind a computer for 14 hours is no fun to most people, as you would say. So certainly not the most invigorating sometimes. But then, figuring out how to do both of those, and then, your body reacts to certain things when you're doing labor as opposed to, typing on a computer. So, I've always enjoyed that. And nothing like responding at 2:00 in the morning to a fire call. It's just nothing like it. You can't just, you got to just try it. It's fun. Yeah, so switching gears a little bit, I guess, as we talk about our industry a little bit, talk about the not-for-profit industry, one of the things I wanted to delve into a little bit further with you, obviously you see a lot of businesses, you work a lot with a lot of different charitable organizations on a variety of levels and a variety of different types of services, things like that. What are you seeing if you were, in the not-for-profit world today? Like, what is the general temperature you're coming across? What are some of the things that you're seeing, people most commonly talk about? What does the industry look like to you in 2026?
One thing a lot of my clients are thinking about right now is how to work with their funders to get more flexible arrangements around restrictions. A lot of my clients are more politically left, and they're under a lot of pressure due to the current administration. And there's a real drought of unrestricted funding. It's there, but like the majority of the grants are restricted. Your auditor, you're seeing this as well, that more grants and more money is being given out as restricted than unrestricted. And that's just creating this additional compliance cost and sort of oversight guardrail that in a lot of cases is not helping the work move forward in a efficient way. So talking with funders about getting unrestricted funding is a pattern, regardless of the vertical or the industry that we're working with. That conversation is happening. And then diversification of funding sources. There's been a lot of shifting in what's available from the government in terms of government grants, and people who were relying on that more heavily are having a more difficult time and having to figure out whether to merge or whether to close down or what their go ahead strategy is. So everyone's seeing that and they're like, how do we offset this? And it's like, what I don't see enough of and what I'd like to see more of is grassroots funding and individual giving campaigns and being able to build support for organizations that's coming in the $25 to $100 a month level. Because it's a lot harder to get 500 people who are giving $100 a month. It's a lot harder to develop that than it is to get one $500,000 grant. But the $500,000 grant goes away. And then what do you do to be a good employer, make sure that you're keeping your staff paid, making sure that you still can cover benefits? So nonprofits have to be employers too. They have to have cash flow and security of revenue generation. And there's a lot of instability in revenue generation right now. So there's a lot of conversations about that I'm seeing. What about you? From your vantage point in the audit field, what are you guys seeing out there?
I would say much of the same. I would say that a lot of the changing in funding trends that we're seeing out of the federal government, state governments, changes in how things are funded, what's funded, departments and agencies going away. Organizations certainly have to pivot. I think the ones that are pivoting better than others are the ones that have what I'll call a diversified revenue stream, as you said. And I think they're the ones that are being successful, whether that's having some level of royalty line that they receive, whether that's having a service delivery component, whether that's changing the model from cost reimbursement grants to more of programmatic fee for service type models, because you can control your costs differently than under a cost reimbursement grant, which is a net zero kind of concept. I'm certainly seeing a lot of that. I'm seeing organizations that are having to shutter their doors because they had one big contract that is no longer being funded. I have seen some organizations that now are receiving significant new funding, and it's interesting because the market itself is volatile. I think costs have, somewhat stabilized. I think there was like heavy inflation for a couple of years. And now I think we're getting back to costs not being as outrageous. But there's certain other socioeconomic trends which affect people, like aging of employees, right? You have employees that are working somewhere, they're retiring. I'm seeing a lot of people retiring sooner now than they probably otherwise would have. And if I were to guess what is causing that, it's the result of the overall temperature of the world. I think a lot of people are realizing that it's a crazy world. There's a lot of changes. It's tumultuous. Every day is a new activity. And so I'm also seeing, the employment structure of organizations. They've had a lot of, especially in the nonprofit world, there's a lot of people that have worked there for many, many years. And I'm seeing a lot of turnover in executive level management. I'm seeing a lot of turnover in key positions. And that's not always a bad thing. I think some of that turnover is bringing in a new voice or bringing in a new person who's going to change it. Some of that is organizations weren't prepared for that. And someone says, I'm retiring in a month. Like, good luck, good luck replacing my job. And that's a reality. And so I think that, a lot of the, organizations that are kind of evaluating from like risk assessment, like evaluating, like what are the risks to our business? And, one of those risks is, can we retain and attract the right talent and people? One of those risks is our funding coming in. One of those risks is, if you think about political risk, as you mentioned, obviously changes in administration have over the past 10 years have significantly flipped, where funding goes and how it goes and what the causes and concerns are that the administrations care about. You have to be able to pivot to those risks. And then, just risks and changes in technology. I think, if I think about what's on most people's minds, most people kind of ask me this general question, what's AI? How do I use it? And, there's not an astronomical amount of like use cases where it's like, oh, I acquired this technology. It's a artificial intelligence. It does X, Y, and Z, and it saved me money. It's, there's a lot of conversation about, it's adding to, or we're going to have to now retrain people. We got to go through this process. So I'm seeing a lot of like conversation and a lot of turnover in technology. A lot of people are adopting new systems. A lot of people are really modernizing most of what they haven't modernized, or, some people went through it during COVID, but some didn't. Some are finding that a lot of stuff they adopted right away didn't work. So I am seeing a lot of change. If I were to use a word, it would be change. Changing in how we get revenue, changing in how we apply our technology, changing in how people that are actually providing the service, changing in the actual service we provide. I've seen an astronomical amount of change at a lot of clients, and some of that change is significant growth. Some of that change is contraction. Some of that change is we're no longer having government grants and we're only having this. It's a different way of running a business. So I'm seeing a significant amount of change across the industry and across a lot of clients. And I think those that can adapt to that change and can very nimbly approach it, address it, and have the ability to do that in a real-time way are the ones that, are certainly thriving in this environment.
I agree.
Are you seeing anything from out there on your client level? Are you seeing anything about how people are carrying out charitable activities? Any differences in how people are carrying out activities, or any significant activities that you're seeing more often than not now with, newer nonprofits or organizations that are starting up? What are you seeing from that perspective as far as the, let's just call it like entity structuring and charitable activities end?
Entity structuring, we are working a little bit more with pairings of C3s and C4s. So figuring out cost sharing arrangements, helping people think through and understand that the C3, C4 setup is overhead intensive because you have two sets of books. You may have two audits. You definitely have two 990s, and you often have two sets of financial policies. It's not as simple as adopting two dogs and just buying more dog food. There's a lot more involved. We're seeing that. Something that I'm seeing that gives me hope and that I find inspiring is conversations happening about, okay, so Trump and Doge came in and they radically cut funding and changed where resources were going. And there was a feeling after that of different services or different parts of this economy being gutted. And we've certainly seen that. Like when we're posting for jobs, we get a lot of people who had USA jobs, and that experience hasn't been a great fit with where we are as a firm. What they were doing and what we do for clients is a little bit different, but we're just aware of it. We're aware that there's a lot of people looking for jobs because of these changes. But some of my clients in the boardrooms, they're getting into conversations about, hey, look, like this happened, let's accept it. And what do we want to build next? Like this this moment is going to be over quickly, and we're still going to be here. We're going to have our mission. We're going to be here working on these problems. And so how do we want to be at the table, and what do we want to promote, and what do we want to build in the vacuum that was created here? And there's a few boards who I report to where they're having that conversation. And it's just really cool to see people taking this proactive vision casting, dreaming, like thinking, okay, let's accept, like a lot of change has happened really quickly. We can't change that, but we can be a part of creating the next thing. And what do we want that to look like? And how are we going to be a player in that? So when I see that, I like that. I like that dreamer energy in the nonprofit community. It's agile. It's always like, okay, well, what's next? Like, yes, these bad things are happening, but like we're here, and what's next?
Yeah. And it's super relevant and important that occurs, because you have to be able to pivot and you have to have that mindset, because you are going to come across a lot of closed doors. And there are going to be a lot of things that go wrong. I'm seeing on that front of innovation. I've been on a couple calls lately and over the past couple of years about organizations where, there's a nonprofit component and a for-profit component, and they're looking how those two things work together in the same ecosystem, as well as how they keep it fair, keep the, not anyone privately benefiting from it, but also further, because there are things the nonprofit industry can do really well and efficiently, and there's things that it can't, and there's things that the for-profit world can do very efficiently that the not-for-profit world can't. And so they're finding innovative ways that both of those work in the same environment and work well together. Obviously staying within the bounds of the IRS regulations and, not tripping any of the IRS regulations related to private benefit, things like that. But I've seen a lot more. I've had a lot more phone calls about that, which is interesting. And some of them work out, some of them don't. Not every single endeavor or venture turns into what it's meant to be. And sometimes we have to say, no, unfortunately, the for-profit way outweighs the nonprofit, and this doesn't sound like the right thing. And we've even seen IRS denials of exemption applications because of that, which was super interesting to kind of be a part of a couple exemption applications where it would come back and say, no, sorry, the for-profit that you're affiliated with has way too much control over you, and we're not going to accept this proposal because they're going to get a private benefit from the arrangement. And I thought that was very interesting to see. So there's ways that it works and ways that it doesn't. But I'm seeing more and more people think along those lines of, how do I accomplish the goal I'm trying to accomplish? Not necessarily how do I run the nonprofit. It's, I'm trying to solve this public issue. How am I going to go about doing that?
Yeah. Does it fit in a C3?
Does it fit in a C3? Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great point. We're seeing a lot of, and I've had a couple organizations on lately, community foundations, fiscal sponsors, things like that. I'm seeing a big uptick in fiscal sponsorship as well. People that are not starting their own nonprofits, but they're operating under an umbrella of other nonprofits. And there's a lot of reasons why that makes a lot of sense, especially from a collaboration and an administration standpoint. Certainly more dollars can go towards programmatic causes when you're in an umbrella like that. But there's a variety of reasons why one would do one and one wouldn't do another. But I am seeing a big uptick in fiscal sponsorship, seeing a big uptick in, even still in the donor advised fund world. Have you?
We're seeing that as well. Yeah. And I agree that the sponsorship model is a great way to get started. We work with a lot of sponsored projects who are moving out. That's actually one of our favorite ideal client scenarios. They've been sponsored for a while. They already have a certain amount of momentum in their mission and conversations going with funders. And then they're going to move out from being under the umbrella. So they need to figure out how to be an employer. They need to figure out how to have their own set of books. They need to set up their own banking and all of their financial system. Like, that's a lot of fun for us. And that's, I would say we're either finding clients who have, in one way or another, been operating for a while. And generally speaking, there's some mess or some problem in their system and then they need a change. And it's usually their balance sheet is needing a lot of care and a lot of cleanup. And so we do a lot of that work. But I love the sponsored projects who are rolling out because it's like a clean slate. We don't have to figure out the mess of what was on the balance sheet before. We can set everything up exactly how it needs to be from the get-go.
Yeah, love it. And also I'm sure that they have very defined mission, like they know what they're doing already. It's just, hey, we're taking this model and expanding upon it, or we're just building our own infrastructure as opposed to utilizing the infrastructure of another organization. I see that as well too. You do see that there is a life cycle to some degree of organizations spinning up in that model and then spinning off in that model. And everyone has their own reasons why one works better than the other. But I think that's great to hear, and I love that you're passionate about serving those types of organizations. They're my favorite too. Like, I love startup nonprofits, ones that are like, oh, here's my idea, here's where I want to take it off the ground. And although at the beginning you're like, all right, we're probably not going to get paid for a little while, but that's okay. And then that at some point, like, okay, this idea is gonna go off the ground and kind of go somewhere. So it's enjoyable to be a part of that and watch people take their ideas. I love talking to founders of nonprofits that say, hey, here's what I'm trying to solve in the world. And I'm like, I love that. And I'm sure it's similar in like the tech world too, people that are just a little bit of a different mindset sometimes. But I love hearing, people that start nonprofit organizations. This is my idea. This is what I'm going to do.
Same type of people. Yeah. Tech founders and founders of nonprofits, like very similar type of person who not scared of an impossible problem, going to find a creative way forward no matter what. Same type of people for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. So obviously there's a lot of different trends going on, a lot of different themes, a lot of different change going on. In your opinion, how does a nonprofit in today's day and age continue to thrive? Like what are some of the elements that make a successful not-for-profit organization today?
Well, we already talked about diversification of funding. So That would be the first thing that comes to mind. I would suggest doing a self-assessment. Like if you're a executive director or in leadership in a nonprofit, do an assessment of your nonprofit of, are we adequately paying attention to and resourcing the programmatic function, the administrative function, and the fundraising function? Because what I usually see is there's some imbalance somewhere. It's usually an under-resourcing of administration and operations or an under-resourcing of fundraising, but it needs to be really balanced. And all of those areas of the organization as an organism needs care and needs leadership. So more energy towards program, and then we've got all of the engine working for finance and operations because we need that. But then we didn't pay enough attention to fundraising and we didn't have that engine working as well. So my point is, like, I see a lot of this where there's not an equal amount of leadership or care or interest in all of those three functions of the organization. And so do a self-assessment. Are we paying enough attention? Do we feel good about our staffing, our strategy, who's doing what are we doing next? What are we focusing on? How are we telling our story for those three areas? And they all go together. When we're working in setting up a finance system, we talk a lot about how are the programs that we're setting up as your cost centers? How are you going to be talking about those, and who are going to be funding? Who are the funders who care about those cost centers? And are these cost centers clearly defined enough that you can go and you can use them as verticals where like you can fundraise both for this and for this. And you're not just assuming that you've got one funder pool who's interested in both of those things. That's not a really good strategy. You want your different cost centers to be feeding into different pools of funders, right? So you need harmony. You need harmony and balance. Of course, those cost centers become how you roll out your program. So that's just a quick theoretical overview of cost centers also mean how you tell your story through fundraising. And it's also how you achieve your impact and your mission in the world. You have to understand that. And all those things need to work in harmony in how a system is set up.
Definitely. Yeah. And we are huge advocates of that, obviously as an auditor, that like we really care about people keep clean records. But the reality is, like, why are clean records important? Well, you as a nonprofit, you're making promises to the public. And you're making asks of the public quite often, especially when you do a lot of grassroots fundraising and other fundraising. You're saying, hey, this is what we're doing and how we're doing it. And if that's not buttoned up on the back end, then how do you know what they're saying is true? And that truthfulness, that that transparency is very important to the outside funding world. And the ability to tell that story through data that you capture is absolutely pertinent, more than ever. And it's always been that way. But I feel like more than ever, people want, people in today's world expect things at their fingertips, and, they can go ask ChatGPT and give them an answer yesterday. People are that's just how it is. I was telling this joke about my son and not in a bad way. I don't want to talk badly about my son, but the way that he was learning, and he was learning with a tablet on the desktop, and he got into this thing of asking it sports statistics. And he's like, so who won the, 1982 World Series? Who had the most home runs in like 1999? Like, and he would just keep asking and asking it. And then it would just give him the answer and give him the answer and give him the answer. And then he goes, Dad, who won the 1998 World Series? I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, how do you not know? Like, Google knows. And I'm just like sitting there. I'm like, yeah, you're right. But like the way that, the point I'm trying to make is that people are learning nowadays with instantaneous access to information. And if you can't produce that instantaneous information, you have a hard time staying up with the current trend of what people are looking for. Now, I'm not saying it has to be instantaneous. And by all means, I'm not a statistician, nor can I keep up with Google, and nor would I ever satisfy my son's requests as far as like what he wants from me. So it's fine. But, I can't answer all those weird statistical questions, although I do have some fun facts that I typically throw at him. But the reality is, how do you get to that point? Well, it doesn't just happen overnight. It happens with the team around you. It happens with capturing information the right way. It happens with a lot of, as you said, strategic discussion on how do we marry all of these things together? How do we marry our fundraising pitch to our internal tracking of information, to our impact metrics that we're producing for the world, to how do we gather the impact metrics, financial and non-financial? All of those things are very, very relevant, and more than ever now with change in technology. And you can have all the technology in the world, but it still takes people like ourselves that are out there every day kind of talking through this, and it takes clients being very active in their business and very active in understanding what it is that you are producing for them, because just because you produce something for them doesn't make sense to them. And I think that's often something that sometimes gets missed, is just because it was produced for you doesn't mean it's right. And same thing with, all the AI engines out there. Just because it told you it doesn't mean it's right. How do you make sure it's right? And those logical conversations are important.
I could say so much about what you just said. I got to pick a few things. So last night,
loaded point.
my 7-year-old said to me, how many centimeters are there in a mile? And I was like, I don't know, So same thing though, but I was like, ask Siri, like ask me about questions about how to live your life and stuff like that. Like I can help you with that, but like, I don't know how many centimeters there are in a mile. And there's so much noise now because of AI, and there's so much more information, and things are cycling so much quicker. So I think the right skill set for the current environment is being able to focus on what's important and knowing how to cut through the noise and just stay focused on what's important. I have 11-year-old daughter, and she was writing an essay, and she's a sixth grader, and they're using AI as a tool for these, right? And then she's getting excited about this essay, and she kept coming back to us and saying, I have 4,000 words with my essay. And it was like, now I've got 5,000 words. And she was like, my essay's getting so big and I'm saying so much. And then we read it and we're just like, you got to trim this down. You've got to focus your message. And I guess I could tie that back to what we're talking about today a little bit, that there's a lot going on in a lot changing really fast. And you got to focus your message. You got to be really clear about what you're trying to do and stay on message and repeat yourself. That's a big part of leadership, being clear about what's important and making sure that everybody hears that message really clearly and staying on point with that message and repeating it over and over again. I think we really need that. And especially with AI giving us 15,000 different ways to say one thing. Like, no, I need the one thing that I'm going to say that's going to get my message across to the audience that I'm trying to get to support the mission that I'm trying to build this thing towards. That's really key.
And if anyone in the audience is curious, there are 160,934.4 centimeters in a mile, according to Copilot.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
There's our fun fact of the day. At the fingertips.
We found it.
Yeah, good stuff. I've been trying. I'm currently doing a triathlon training, and
nice.
I've been doing math in my head. I'm like, all right, so I have to swim 1.2 miles, and so the pool is 55 feet long. That means I have to do 115 laps to be able to swim that. I'm like, I did about 2 yesterday, so I got a long way to go. Haven't used my math brain in a while.
I really support that. In my household, we're all trying to stay really active through the winter and get exercise every day. And it's really helped this winter. We've been more focused on it. And we talk a lot in our practice about the importance of habits. And we try to break down the bookkeeping and the accounting process into these little small habits. Like one simple example is like AP. We try to turn AP cycles into days of the week so that like everyone who's a part of the submission or the review or the approval, they know, oh, it's Monday, so that's my day to do this. And it's Tuesday, so it's my day to make sure that everything that was submitted was put in. Oh, it's Wednesday and I'm an approver. So Wednesday means I've got to go in and review everything and approve everything that's queued up. And our clients really like this because it's better than a 2-week cycle. It's really common to set up AP on a bookkeeping cycle to flop every other week. But then you have to think, is this a week? Is this an on week or an off week? Do I have to worry about it today? But if you just know, oh, it's Wednesday. Wednesday, I always do this. The amount of effort it takes to do that is less and less. So sort of riffing off of like exercise habits. But like if you're going to train for a triathlon, if you're going to do a little bit every day and stay on this consistency with it, like those habits are going to compound and really stack. And then at some point you're going to be strong enough and fit enough to do that triathlon and make it through those miles and swim the 112 laps or whatever it is.
Yeah, but you got to, as you've said, you got to break it down to smaller chunks, and you have to break it down to smaller chunks that you make habitual. Otherwise, you can't be sporadic about it. You have to follow that cadence. Otherwise, you got to put in the work, follow the cadence, build those slow habits over time, small habits over time, and then they turn a long way. That's cool that you apply that to the day to day as well. I definitely think about that a lot, and I give tips out to my group on a weekly basis, and I'll bring in some of these life things and kind of share them out. I find that super important, just to think about how do I be better every day, and what are some of the things I can put in place that can help me do that, and how do I be consistent about it? Consistency is such a hard thing in today's day and age, but consistency is key. And on that point, the thing I always like to find out, and especially people that are leading businesses, leadership is one of these topics that's talked about a lot, but it's very difficult in practice. You can have all the tips in the world, but the second that you get thrust into it, all chaos breaks loose. But as a leader of a business, as a leader in the not-for-profit industry, working with a lot of leaders, someone entering this industry, whether it's accounting or nonprofit, what would be a tip or a couple tips of advice you would give to that new leader entering into this industry? What are some things that you would share that you've learned over your years of being in that leadership role on a variety of levels, both CFO for your clients as well as running a firm yourself? What does that look like, and what are some tips that you would give to a new leader who's kind of entering this industry?
I think it's really important to have some sort of reading habit as a leader. You don't know enough to be a leader ever. So you're always going to be underqualified for the next challenging thing that comes up. And you have to be preparing yourself in various ways, whether that's staying healthy or having good habits in general. So I'd say the two morning habits for me is exercise and then listening to an audiobook. I'll go on a walk with my dogs and I'll listen to an audiobook, and I consume a lot of information that way. I really like Patrick Lencioni and sort of where he's coming from on a lot of leadership and business management and team management stuff. And so I found him I would recommend checking out Patrick Lencioni or the book Smart Brevity. Smart Brevity is put out by the people who do Politico, and it's a practical method of distilling and simplifying your communication. And I see this a lot, especially now. Like, my team is distributed. I have over 50 people in India, in an office in India that we run. And then the rest of my team of 17 people are scattered around the US. Everybody works from home. We're trying to coordinate through Slack. We have a lot of meetings. We have too many meetings over Zoom. There's people who I've worked with for years who I've never met in person. And in that type of environment, you have to stay on message. And I've said this before in this conversation, but you got to keep it simple and you got to be clear. So I guess in line with that advice, I'll stop there, but keep your message simple, repeat yourself, be really clear about what you want to accomplish, what you need to do next, learn the discipline of focusing on that on a regular basis. I'll say one more thing, straying from my advice. Every week I pick 3 things that I have to get done that week. And I share that with various colleagues. And I say, I'm going to get this done this week. I've been doing that for years. And that practice helps me understand my capacity and what I need to break things down to and what the right size goal is for 1 week. And if you're leading people, then if you know what you can get done in a week, then you're better at estimating what you could get done in a month. And if you're better at estimating what you could get done in a month, then you could project what you might be able to get done in a quarter. So that skill set really scales, knowing how much time it takes and how much energy it takes to get something done. It takes practice, and it takes sort of the study of the people that you're working with and who your team is. But these little things that you can do on a regular, consistent basis every week, and it's consistent. You said consistency over time when you were talking about the triathlon thing. It's everything in leadership and in being a key player on your team is about consistency over time, clarity of message and consistency over time.
Love it. We had a guest on very recently who very similarly, and your comment about reading to gather insight from others who are in either the same or different disciplines to apply to your day to day as a leader. I do the same. I try to read a book a month. Some of them are business books. Some of them are not business books. I'm also a big history buff, so I like reading like random history from like long ago. Not current history. Like I like Roman era history, stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
I tend to read different things in that front, or read fiction books or nonfiction books that are about historical events, things like that. But I always try to bring outside influences and intellect from that point. And most of the leaders, our prior CEO and current CEO of Witham, same thing. They have like a library that they share with everyone. Hey, here's the book I'm reading all the time, and I glean that from them and still apply that. Where I'm a big advocate of that. So. Totally can resonate with you on that.
Nice.
You can never know enough.
Yeah, I just got into. I'm reading about the formation of the U.S. Constitution right now, learning all kinds of stuff that I didn't know. And history's great. I'm new to history. I haven't been very good at consuming a lot of history, so I'm listening through like a 35-hour history of the U.S. right now. It's really
Oh, cool. I got to do that too. So yeah, how I like to end up, every episode I ask people what their call to action is. Usually I say, what can the public do to help you? So yeah, what would your call to action be? If you can do a soft plug to your nonprofit that you run.
Oh, thanks for reminding me. Yeah. So, we've started a nonprofit in the Truckee region where I'm based called Truckee River Public Waters. So, anybody who wants to check us out, it's truckeeriverpublicwaters.org. And we're looking for support to ensure the public access to the Truckee River as a precious resource for our generation and future generations. I'm a fly fisherman, and I really have enjoyed having access to that river, and more land is getting bought up, and various ways people are blocking people being able to access the river. So we're looking for support to be able to purchase easements and eventually purchase pieces of land and sort of set up permanent ways that people can get in and out of the river. So that's something that I'm passionate about, and is a project that I've been putting a lot of time into the past couple of years. And my general call to action, I think it's about having good habits. You're working on the triathlon thing, and I'm getting up early and trying to stay focused on some health discipline. And the way that multiplies your ability to be on point and on task and get a lot done in a day has been really inspiring for me. And the ethic that we're working from in my household is around embracing discomfort and understanding that change and growth and transformation doesn't come from a place of comfort. You have to embrace discomfort and know that change and growth in a positive direction is going to require some discomfort. So I'd say my call to action is get uncomfortable and grab onto something that you want to see different in your life or in the world and get after it.
Love it. I love that message. Yeah, my tagline that I end every email here internally as well as in the firehouse is stay disciplined in GSD. And
nice.
I don't like using curse words on here, but you can figure out what GSD means, and it means get things done. So always a big fan, and I love that message. Love that message. Yeah, Burton, this was awesome. Appreciate you sharing a lot of this insight with our audience. You know, obviously you're on the front lines of working with a lot of organizations on a day-to-day basis, working with a lot of leaders in this industry. And, obviously bring a lot of good leadership yourself running a business, and a lot of the conversations you have on a day-to-day basis, really, really are impactful to helping our audience understand kind of what's important in the world, what people are seeing out there. And, your firm obviously does a phenomenal job of the work that you do. So really appreciate you taking the time, dedicating your time on the show today and, being here with us and sharing that insight. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, no doubt. And Warriors, thank you for listening. Subscribe and meet us right back here for another episode of With Them Civic Warriors. Bye, everybody.